There's something I'm always reminded of when I travel internationally, when I take an airplane, and that's the intense carbon footprint that we make when we travel around the world. It's not something I've had to worry about for many years, being in retreat. And it always reminds me of this story. There's this wonderful Buddhist by the name of Martin, and he volunteers at many retreat centers and monasteries around the world. He's very skilled in renewable energy. He's an electrician, and he kind of volunteers his time, helps maintain the monasteries. And one year he came to visit us in Nepal. He was at another monastery, helping them with some problems they had. In general, then the electricity, the infrastructure is very, very poor in Nepal. And so they kind of need help. And it's rare to find somebody like a trained Westerner who has got a lot of skill in these things. So he was traveling around Nepal and he came to our retreat center. Now, our Lama is very skillful, and generally anybody who comes to the retreat center will be asked to give a little talk to the community. Now, part of this is a training for us to hear about other people's perspectives, and part of it is also for the person who has to give the talk, because it means that they have to develop some kind of ability to speak publicly and have a little bit of courage. It's a kind of a way for our Lama to test people. It's also an opportunity for that individual. Now in this case, and he was giving us a talk on the environment, and specifically on conserving the electricity in the retreat. We have a lot of problems. As I said, the infrastructure in Nepal is very poor. And so he was giving us a talk, and he made a wonderful presentation comparing the energy consumption between an LED light bulb and a traditional tungsten light bulb. And it made it very clear to us. So part of Lama's skillful method was to get us to stop wasting the electricity. And it wasn't just to save him money. It was because if you destroy or you deteriorate the resources of a monastery, then it seemed to be very, very bad karma. So one should always be careful with resources. Really, the Buddha was like the original environmentalist. And the monks at the time when the Buddha was around and just would live under a tree, you know. It was very limited to what they were allowed to build. They weren't allowed to cut down trees or cut the grass, etc. And there was this very strong notion to preserve the environment, but especially not to squander resources. And that's because these resources are gained through the accumulation of previous karma, positive karma. So Martin was giving this talk about how to conserve electricity, what uses more electricity, how incredibly difficult it is if you were to use something like an electric kettle when the electric system in Nepal was very poor. And then at the very end, he thought to make a footnote, and he wanted to talk a little bit about carbon emissions with motor cars. And so he started to say something like, now you should be aware that when you take a taxi or go in the car, then you should try to carpool. If you have more people in one journey, then you will save on your carbon footprint. And then suddenly, as he was giving this talk, he stopped. And he looked around the room, and he realized that basically everyone there had been there for at least 6 or maybe even 8 years, and never really had to leave the retreat center. Normally, we'll have to go out once a year to renew our visas, but during COVID, for example, then I didn't have to leave the retreat center for 3 whole years. And so suddenly he realized that out of all the Westerners, then these people who are on retreat probably have the smallest carbon footprint. That's very much the case. I was in Nepal for 8 years. I mean, I only planned to be there for 3 months, but I ended up being there for 8 years, and so I never flew in 8 years. And I only had to go into town on several occasions, not very often. So it always reminds me how when one is in retreat, It's very light on the planet Earth. You use very little resources. For example, I spent 4 years in the retreat on the island of Arran, and I never left the front door. In 4 years, I never got in a car, and I certainly didn't fly. And not only that, when you're spending all day meditating in your box, then you use very few calories. So I found that I could eat just a very small bowl of food every day, and that would be sufficient. Also, because of the practices we were doing, then we weren't allowed to have the heating on, except for something like 1 hour a day. And to be quite honest, I don't think I washed my clothes more than twice in those 4 years. And so really, by engaging in practice, then one demands very little from the planet. And so now I'm on the outside, and I've had to travel a few times on the airplane. And the first thing that pops into my mind is that it really isn't good to demand so much of the environment. And for example, to fly here and there. But I have no choice. I went to Nepal recently, and the reason for that is when I left in a hurry. It was an emergency, and I only took a small bag with me. And I had to go back, close my bank account, collect my things. There were loose ends I needed to tie up. I needed to have closure. And similarly, now I'm returning to Scotland, to the retreat center I left over 8 years ago. Because there, I still have some of my possessions, ritual instruments. And likewise, I have some important documents in the monastery in Scotland. So I have no choice. But once I've organized these things, I've sort of been able to attend to my affairs, then I don't really see the need to go traveling here and there. Really, I can do everything I want remaining on Vancouver Island. Of course, there will be trips, but in the long run, then my plan is to remain in retreat. Once my parents have passed from this world, and they no longer need my care, then I plan to go to the retreat center and remain there and dedicate myself to practice and try to garner the results that are only achieved on the spiritual path. So I've got about an hour before my flight, and so I'm going to go check in soon. But when I get to Iceland, then I'll try to send you another video. I'm trying to use my time well while I'm traveling and do things that are beneficial. And it is my hope that I might bring some benefit in the activity that I engage in. So until next time, or until later, and see you soon.